We get to discuss democracy and retrograde tonight, and we have one of the co-authors with us, Sami Sage. Sami is a co-founder and chief brand officer of Betches Media, and she has established the brand's politics and activism's vertical, Betches News. She also hosts the award-winning daily news podcast, The Morning Announcements. If you have not had the chance to check out The Morning Announcements, I highly encourage it. It is a great dose of news every day. And pro tip, you actually don't have to listen to it in the morning if you don't have time. Just fit it into the rest of your day. And so with that, Sami, let me say hello and let me hand you the stage for a little bit to just say hello to our audience and share a little bit about Democracy and Retrograde and what brought you and Emily to write it.
Thank you so much, Mary Catherine. I am thrilled to be here and to be speaking about this book. I am really honored to be speaking about it at such a particular point in our country's history, considering all of the things that we're experiencing and witnessing that are quite out of the ordinary for the democracy that many of us have come to understand that we were brought up in. So, as we know, this is not necessarily a new phenomenon. And my co-author, Emily Amick, and I, we basically connected because, like Mary Catherine mentioned, I run a news vertical on social media, and I've been doing that since 2015, 2016. And that was quite a while before most news was really being shared on social media as prominently as it is today, and particularly on Instagram, and for young women. So Emily was doing something similar. She was, speaking as an influencer and as sort of an expert, having worked as a counsel in Chuck Schumer's office. So the two of us shared that experience, and, I really respected her content, and, we ended up getting in touch shortly after January 6th, and we started becoming friends, and, ultimately over time, as we were nearing the 2024 election, we were constantly getting a question from our audiences. What should I do? I feel so hopeless. This political discourse feels so intractable, and it feels like we all live in different realities. And, people would really just frequently turn to us for, kind of like a sanity check and understanding for how to navigate it. So what we wanted to do was write a book that could answer that question in so many words. And really the truth is that you can't answer that question just in, there's no quick fix to this. And even I would say our book is not a quick fix to it. It was not written with 2024 specifically in mind, although it was obviously highly relevant and timed to come out so that it could help people before this election. But the book itself is technically nonpartisan, and we wanted to write something that felt universal and somewhat timeless in the advice we were giving people. And for that reason, it's really more about civic engagement and, participating in society as a form of self-care. And then basically there's a workbook element to the book where we have quizzes and exercises for people to sort of make sense of their values and make sense, really articulate the future that they see, what's important to them in that future. And then the goal is, splitting people into four different civic personalities. And for each one, we sort of explain how you can contribute to our democracy in any year, in any circumstance, in building democracy, and what you can do depending on the different resources you have available to you. Do you have a lot of time to devote to this? Is it something you're looking to make a full-time job? Is it something you're looking to be sort of an extra, you have a few hours you can devote to it, and really looking at what is unique about you that you can contribute, because, not everyone can do no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And I think people often get lost in what that thing should be, and they kind of are, unable to move from there. So that was really the goal of the book. And, there's a lot to it in terms of drawing on history and, the philosophy behind what makes up a democracy, and how isolation has really harmed us all. So, yeah, I think that is a pretty solid rundown of what you can expect from it.
It's fantastic. I loved the interactive nature of it. And there were times when you would have questions and I would think, I don't know if I'm really going to need that much room to answer one of the questions you have. Because for those of you who are with us who haven't had the chance to read it yet, there are workbook components or quiz-like components to it that help direct your interest in civic engagement. And that's what I think is really fantastic. You didn't write a book that's just telling us what to do step by step. It really felt to me like you were asking me to kind of study what I was comfortable with, what I was ready for. And then you said, here are some options if it turns out you're ready for this or that. I think at one point you even mentioned like a bit of a choose your own adventure civic engagement style, which I love. And this book club is a great fit because with Share My Lesson, we love to interact with our book club attendees as well. And so while you're with us today, you are going to be doing a few poll questions, just so we can get a feeling for who is here. So let's just do a practice poll question right now. We have our colleague Amy. So this is just for practice to make sure you know where, like how to participate. And so our practice poll question tonight is, how many AFT book clubs have you attended? A, this is my first. B, I've attended 1 to 3. C, I've attended more than 3. We started the AFT Book Club last January, and we've been holding AFT Book Clubs just about every month for the past year. Our topics, we've had fiction, we've had nonfiction, we've had current events. It's really been great to have such a diversity of authors. I have had the opportunity as one of the partners I would pick C. I've had more than 3, but let's see what we say. Who do we have with us tonight? Oh, half of our audience tonight is at their first book club. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy it and you come back for more. And thank you so much to the folks in our audience who have been to more than one book club. Thanks for coming back. We are always looking forward to your participation, and we love having your recommendations too. So look forward to opportunities to suggest future books for our book club as well. Now, we'll have future poll questions with some of the other questions Sami and I are going to get into. But one of the things I wanted to sort of do at the beginning of this conversation is something you do at the beginning of the book, Sami, and that is you make a really important point about differentiating between people who are disengaged from sort of civic engagement out of protest versus folks who are disengaged out of apathy. And I thought that was an incredibly important point to make at the very beginning of your book, to sort of honor the places where different people are. Could you talk a little bit about why you and Emily included that and just what went into making sure that got included?
Well, I think as, two white women of certain privilege, we're coming from a particular point of view. And really, naturally, we're speaking not on purpose, but most likely we understand that the more likely audience is going to be people who are relatively close to what we are, for the most part. You don't have a ton of like white men buying this book, from what I can tell. But to that point, we were looking to solve the problem of apathy or confusion or hopelessness, not to solve, the fundamental problems with the system and the harms that the country has done and the reasons why people may not choose to engage. And, I think the difference is that when someone's disengaging out of protest, they've probably really thought, or I would hope or would think that they've given a bit more thought to the whole thing than someone who's disengaging out of apathy, who I think of as like throwing their hands up and saying, I don't want to deal with this. I don't know. It's too much, without necessarily that having been based in harms to them or personal experiences with where they really brush up against the system.
Right.
What we're really trying to speak, who we're trying to speak to, is people who the system has been invisible to them, and all the ways that they've benefited from it have been invisible to them, or even people who haven't necessarily benefited from it, but maybe it's not visible regardless. And showing that we are all the people, and the institutions are just people at the end of the day. And we are all the ones who make up that system. So if you don't even realize that there has been a whole system that's been providing for you and, enabling your life, then of course you don't know where to start, because you don't even realize, when all you think is that the system is voting or running for office or sending postcards or phone banking or door knocking, then everyone who does not connect with that is also, and I mean, you're basically just disregarding people, time, and all these other parts, when really voting is kind of an end step to all of these, to what creates, at this point, to what creates these institutions.
Right. I just appreciated you making that point right at the beginning, to say, listen, we're, if you haven't engaged because you are, again, it's out of some apathy, then let's travel through this book together. You do something else that I have never seen anyone ever do, and that is you equate civic engagement with self-care. And that, I have to say, as someone who has been a teacher, who has represented teachers, who has belonged to a union that represents healthcare professionals, and who now advocates on behalf of the labor movement and democracy, self-care conversations can be really patronizing, especially to that group of people, right? It's heavy on carbohydrates and very light on power. And here is this box of donuts in the teacher's lunchroom, or here's this plate of cookies at the nurse station once a year, or here's your free burrito if you show your your work badge. But the way you frame self-care is powerful. And I would love to know, how you came up with that, because it sounds very elemental to you. And as soon as you said it, it sounded very powerful and engaging to me. And I'd love for you to talk for a moment about how you came to that concept, because it really seems that grounded the book then in how you take care of yourself is really how you take care of the country.
Yeah, this concept actually predates this book for me. For a long time, I had a podcast talking about wellness and diet culture with my co-founder and friend. And we were inspired to do that. We had that in late 2017, 2018. We were inspired to do that because of the way that people were presenting self-care online and calling that wellness. And it's really a very capitalistic, self-involved version of self-care. And
oh my gosh, yes.
I knew intuitively then that is not what actual self-care is supposed to be. That's consumerism and also fronting. Because if you're posting about how peaceful and zen you are on the internet, you're really not. I don't want to just, make such generalizations, but if that is the core of your self-care, then that is not really self-care. It's outside validation, an algorithm, But
Yes.
so this for me predated. This is I guess maybe a long concept coming, because I had always, I had been thinking about this for longer than even to this book. And self-care the thing is, it's not the kind of thing where you can give suggestions for what to do, but if you're doing it and you're not taking the essence out of that activity, then you're not actually engaging in self-care. And I think there are a few things here. With the idea of, when you said, bringing, donuts or something, or, that
Bubble baths are another thing people mention.
I would say someone bringing donuts to an office, like, it's not about, like, if you make it about the, like, snack and, like, we're gonna have stuff our, we just want to have, like, a snack. But if it's imagine if it's someone who, like, brings them around, like, brings it and, like, for an occasion, and, like, you all sort of take a break and connect. It's like you can use food for self-care, but it's about the attitude you take towards it. So now put this onto civics. I think people sort of misdefine civics. Like I said, like voting and canvassing and all these things are sort of end results. But if you're in a democracy, and we sort of take the opposite of this, if you read Hannah Arendt, suddenly very relevant, an autocrat wants people to be atomized and separate and individual, because that makes them ripe for conspiratorial thinking. And what they really want is for people to subsume themselves to the state and have the state be the arbiter of truth and reality for them. Now, if you have real relationships in your real life, that's very easy if you never speak to anyone. And, I think that's where you get some of this, like, incel vote thing. And why radicalization on the internet is the algorithm specifically select for those things. The opposite is people connecting, taking care of each other, knowing that, it's not about, like, the grand party you throw. It's about having someone who will invite you somewhere, or you'll invite them. It's like this reciprocity is really critical for democracy. And part of why I think that those bonds are really significant is because right now we are so polarized. And so the other side, so to speak, or someone who doesn't align with your views, is like a caricature. And
right.
And everyone who's not part of your side is a caricature. When in reality, like, 90 million people didn't vote. They're not even part of this conversation. So many people who did vote are deeply disengaged, people who live lives that we could never, that are just so different from the lives of the people in this group, which are all fairly common. And I think the more that we involve ourselves with people who are different from us, that, I think, is a way that's persuasive and caring. And, like, the appeal of someone who says they're eating the cats and dogs lessens, because you're like, actually, no, like, I know someone who has temporary protected status, and this happened. And, it's like those lies can't take as much bite, and grievance doesn't command as much power, because you don't feel as abandoned. So really, it's like,
we're interconnected.
Like, you look at some of these people who are in charge, and, like, they're deeply antisocial beings. I don't mean, like, they, they pursue antisocial values, and they say antisocial things, and it's mean. And that whole movement gets its kicks from being mean to people, from lying about them. It all started with Obama and his birth certificate, just a lie. And there is a reason that people went to that. And it didn't just happen this election. It's been cooking. So
absolutely,
people say, and I have many thoughts for what the Democrats should do, like, many, many thoughts on that. But the real I don't see how we actually reverse much until the culture is fundamentally different. And part of that is seeing our connections with people as priority, as that is self-care, not the consumerism and being out for ourselves and shutting people out.
That feeds directly into, I think, one of the big lessons I took away from this book around the importance of public spaces or third spaces. And this idea, and you give incredible data in this book, which I appreciate. But then you also, like, I love the way you sprinkle in real stories from people for the vibes piece of it as well. Because some people will love the data of, the sort of shocking data from Bowling Alone, but then other people reading the book may connect with that, that story of the person who decided to join something and found real joy in it and found real camaraderie. I know one of the words you come back to in the book is interconnectedness, and how public spaces or those third spaces find meaning in civic life, I think is the phrase I took away from this book. And seeing that sort of as everyday democracy, as a way of strengthening our democracy. And again, this sort of layered approach that says that, democracy belongs to all of us. Engaging is an act of self-care, and public spaces and third spaces are healthy for us at the same time they're healthy for our democracy. And so I'm wondering, was that also something that you have known for, just innately, or did you come across the data and really make that connection? Because I think it is just a fundamental lesson from the book.
I think this was something that became more apparent to me during the pandemic, in particular. And, you see, however, I live in New York. I was in New York City during it. And you saw how people came together every night for the essential workers, and how the people who were willing to risk their lives to go to bag groceries were the heroes. And then you look at what actually happened with policy, and the pandemic was a massive wealth transfer to the richest people. And there is just it feels like up is down in terms of how it should be. And, I know I'm speaking to teachers, so I can say our country is behind because teachers and doctors and people who are really necessary for a functioning long-term society are deeply undervalued and get screwed, frankly. Why? Yeah. And there's so much to, unpack with that. And with the third spaces, it goes back to part of that consumerism thing. To leave your house nowadays, you pretty much have to spend money. You can't not. And for that reason, when most people leave their houses, and people are doing so less, they are only interacting with people, for the most part, who are very similar to them in socioeconomic status. And when you have third spaces, places that are free, parks, libraries, town squares where there's businesses around it, farmers markets, or I guess that wouldn't, maybe it'd be a third space, whatever. I think it'd be a positive,
Exactly.
When you have those places, that creates intersections for people of different stripes to meet. And sometimes you'll meet someone, if you ever sitting next to someone in the airport, you might get into a whole conversation with them. And then you realize what their politics are. And that experience is very different than seeing that same person make a comment about politics on the internet, where you're like, I hate that person, what an idiot. Where if you're in this conversation in the airport, you kind of get to know them. And whatever you might think about their politics, you will assume better of how they got there, and you'll understand them. And you're not going to write them off as some just hopeless racist, whatever you want to say. And I think that what I'm saying about how the self-care and the fabric, the interconnectedness. Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone was very influential for us in the writing of this, but conceptually it just rang so true. I literally picture it, I'm very good at visualization. I literally picture it as like a tattered rug that is coming apart when we don't have these places in between that we can grab onto and, sort of connect in a way that, I mean, you can even get really granular with this, where I think there was a study done where it was like someone went out and didn't interact with anyone, and they had someone else go out and interact, and they spoke to, the cashier and different neighbors, and the person who spoke to people had a better experience. They felt better, like on a survey about their day. It felt better about what they did.
Right.
So they did, in the experiment, kind of the same thing. So I think and if you think about it, like, people are angry. They're just angry, and they go online and they're on their phones and they're, being fed more things that will make them angry.
Oh, exactly. No, exactly. And you're so right. That person, might feel really anonymous, or you've been following them on social media for a long time, and they say something and you blow it off because you think you have nothing in common with them. So different than the person you've been playing hockey next to in your, Sunday night hockey league, or worshiping next to every weekend, or you've been quilting next to or knitting next to every other week for the last 2 years. You're absolutely right. You've got like a different point of interaction with them, and maybe a different point of care, which I think is something you get to.
Of course. I also want to add to that, which is that most people's views are not as like strong or worked through as we might assume. And I think there's this sense that, like, if you know what someone thinks on one issue, you can kind of checklist them. And in the most extreme parts of both party or, different sort of ideologies, you could, for the most part, do that. But that is not 70% of the country. And when we write people off in general, you lose that opportunity to connect with that 70%, because, and we call them in the book the exhausted majority, they just tune out. And it's just, that's what repels them. And when every sort of normal, reasonable person is like, I can't be part of this because I'm apathetic, because this is crazy shit. Sorry. When all those people put themselves on the sidelines, all you have is the most extreme viewpoints that are not willing to compromise. And
you feel more exhausted and alone because you're not seeing that nuanced viewpoint show up anywhere. Yeah.
Yes. People shout you down.
Yeah. And that conversation of third spaces really helped me just reflect as I was reading on what are my third spaces? Where am I spending time, to your point, for free, in community with people, or even utilitarian, like on the bus, to get from one end of town to the other, like just in community with people. We have a poll question around this as well, because I thought it would be an interesting question. So Amy, if you could put up that poll question. Democracy in Retrograde makes the point that belonging to groups is important. So do you, A, belong to at least one civic organization, union, or house of worship? B, belong to 1 to 3 organizations or clubs outside of work? And C, belong to more than 3 organizations or clubs outside of work? We'd love to know. I thought, this is the sort of question I could even just look back in history, to your point about that test where somebody went out and didn't interact with anyone and interacted with other people. And I think back to when I was involved in lots of different civic organizations, right? Like a women's organization, and I was involved in my union and in a house of worship and everything. I realized I was busy and I felt pretty fulfilled. So, like, again, your book just had an awesome opportunity for me to reflect on what that meant to me, thanks to you bringing it up. So let's see what our audience tonight Oh, let's go back to the poll because it looks like maybe people did not press A, B, or C. Folks, we'll give you one moment to go back. Belonging to groups is important. So would you pick A, that you belong to at least one civic organization, union, club, house of worship? B, you belong to 1 to 3 of them? Or C, you belong to more than 3 organizations, clubs, etc., outside of work? Let's give you a moment to answer. And let's see if we recorded your answers this time. All right. Well, for some reason, the answers are not recording. That is the next poll question, which we will get to that poll question. I mean, we can get to that poll question now as well. Here's the conversation I wanted to have about news. I was just so grateful to read about the portion about news consumption, because I think I feel like it's a conversation I'm having with lots of people, but I don't know that everyone is coming to a conclusion about what healthy news consumption looks like. And I am really grateful with your profession in communications that this is something we'd love to hear from you about. So let's just check with our folks with us tonight. Where do you get your news? A, I mostly listen to the news. B, I mostly read the news. C, I mostly watch the news. Or D, I do all 3 on any given day. I will say I'd find myself mostly listening. I'll have the radio on, podcasts. I am really grateful to those of you who love to just sort of help pack up the news for me so I can catch some headlines, make sure I, as I call it, sort of have headline knowledge going into it. Let's see if our audience, Amy, can you get us the results of how people consume? All right, so majority of people, maybe they already have this incredible news consumption balance already. That's fantastic. Otherwise, we have a lot of readers in the group. No surprise, being this is a book club, that we have lots of people who read the news. So based on knowing what folks are saying now, Sami, why is this important to include this idea about news consumption in a book that makes such great points about like public spaces and about addressing some other things?
Well, the having a free press is cornerstone of democracy. I think there was a quote from Thomas Jefferson who said that if you could have, I believe it was Congress or the press, or maybe it was the presidency or the press, that he would choose the press. But the point is, the press is incredibly critical, and a free press that's able to hold power to account. News consumption is, I would argue, I mean, sometimes I just think like, how did we all get here? And sometimes my like ground zero conclusion is news silos, that people live in these alternative realities and that they do not believe the other side. And when when you ask what can we sort of do about our news consumption, everyone's kind of grappling with that. I think the problem is that people don't actually have control over it. And because we're on our phones, and the same app where you get your email and you keep up with your friends on Instagram or Facebook, or, you are getting news fed to you there. So even if you don't want to know, you can't not know. I know people who didn't want to, wanted to kind of shut off the news in the wake of the election, at least for a period of time. And it's becomes unavoidable. And that's, I think, a big difference, because you used to be able to say, like when I started Betches, when I started doing the news on Instagram, it was like one of the only things that was that was covering news like very publicly in that format. And like even like the New York Times and Washington Post, like they weren't really putting their stuff on Instagram. So basically it's like you used to be able to opt out before, just turn off your notifications or whatever.
Sure.
Now it's inherent in everything. It's the Super Bowl. You know, you can't even have a Super Bowl without there being a political bend to it. It really, I think part of it is that why it's so important, aside from the free press piece, and discrediting the free press is incredibly dangerous. It's that this is what sets the discourse and has created the Overton window for some of these deeply antisocial and false and damaging stories, because they come from the way that our news media has bifurcated, and also just is capitalistically incentivized. The model is broken. There are so many issues with it, and I don't know. I see it as it's a tech problem, I think, to a large extent. And they also capture the revenue. I mean, they also capture revenue, and it's expensive to be any sort of publication distributing your work. So, I think if you want to talk solutions, you're looking at something with tech.
Oh, absolutely. We have a lot of folks in our book club and in our communities who are also just very concerned about influence of tech on our students, and we're working very closely with what a more holistic solution can look like. In the meantime, I think we have a lot of conversations where people either begin or end the conversation with, "I'm just so tired." And there is this exhaustion element. You even mentioned at one point in the book of using exhaustion as a weapon. And I am curious how much of that is by design, and how do we, and then interrelated to other things, how do we use our third spaces to sort of tap in and out to not get exhausted, to not, which also leads to some hopelessness, which I know you address really, really well in this book as well.
Yeah, of course, the exhaustion is by design, and I think in some cases more than others. I mean, you look at the Doge situation, that's all by design. Steve Bannon has spoken about trying to achieve escape velocity where you just tire people out. That's right. The Gish Gallop is one of Donald Trump's signature rhetorical moves. It is all about that, because in any situation where they want to operate by raw power. They want to really not have anything else determine who is in charge or who gets to set policy or set the rules and set the guardrails of who gets to make money and have resources, based on a principle of raw power, not on a principle of consensus, or doing what's best for everybody. And that is a major piece of it. Getting, low engagement, getting people to be so deeply disengaged that even when they get engaged, it's like, oh, well, I thought Joe Biden sent these condoms to Gaza. Like, it's they want people to be, because when you start there, where do you even start to deconstruct something like that? When you talk about USAID, how are you even going to start to explain the importance of soft power all of a sudden? And that this isn't just like, candy to different countries because we're nice. This is a strategic part of what has kept us safe from physical violence in our own country. What has kept the American dollar stable and a standard? Why people speak, has anyone not wondered why people speak English everywhere? It's because of things like USAID that have been taken for granted. And again, it goes back to like the deprioritization of really important things like teaching and education and health and, proper.
Back to a time when that interconnectedness, again, was a common value that people shared. So this idea that we all do better when we all do better, as my
right. I mean, that is so.
Paul Wellstone would say, yeah.
Of course. I mean, that is an idea that, when I was in college when Obama was elected. And for me, I'm like, oh, we're good. We took care of it. We're only going to be functioning on this rising tide lifts all boats type of that is what America is, and we have actualized it. And there's always going to be forces fighting against that. You had another question, I think. What was another piece of it?
Oh, it was, again, just this, how you combat this exhaustion with that participation in third spaces to sort of be like, feel like you can tap in and out a little bit, and how those two things are interrelated.
Yeah, so, I mean, the fact is, even if we're all exhausted. That I see is just like a part of life. It's a question of how to mitigate that burnout. And I think part of that is mitigated by picking what you want to do and what is your role. And how are you going, and that's why, we have these different personalities in the book and then suggestions for different things you can do. That's meant so that you can find something that you're less likely to burn out on. Because if you're working on, local campaigns and that's really not for you, and you just think this is like the only thing that you can do, you're probably not going to be too hyped or excited to do it, even if you made great friends. And that's really, I think a lot of it is the people. When you find a community, and usually it's easier to find a community when you share passions, and that's why finding yours is really important, because then you'll be around people who share that. You'll be more excited to do things, and you'll feel more full, even in really terrible situations. Like, I'm someone who really thrives in a crisis. And so, obviously I don't want a crisis, but it's like where you think, oh, that would really exhaust you, that actually empowers me. And I think that, for some people it's crisis conditions, for some people it's having friends around, for some people it's, really enjoying it. And I think that, like, it's okay to not have necessarily something in your, another thing we talk about is, like, people go through different seasons of life. If you just, lost a family member and you're dealing with certain things and you feel like you can't get out of bed or something, it's, while that might help, I wouldn't beat yourself up if it doesn't. So we talk a lot about how different, if you have, you have 3 kids under 3 and that you're probably not going to have time to join the school board just yet. But there's different things that people can, we talk about that it's about navigating those seasons with your needs and, understanding yourself as an evolving person.
There's this great undercurrent in the book of just saying you are enough. And it comes out in different times. To your point, it comes out at those times where you assess where you are in life and how busy you feel with these responsibilities or commitments. And then if, like, where there's room, consider these things. And I really, again, I just appreciated that engaging, the engaging way the two of you wrote. You just engage with the reader. And of course, the Civic personality quiz was a lot of fun. I found myself like talking out loud to myself as I was answering questions and adding things up. And I do want to zoom in on that before we get to some audience questions I noticed. And one is of the Civic personalities, you have leader, you have connector, you have giver. And folks, if you have not taken the Civic personality quiz yet, I highly recommend it. It's just a great reflective tool. But I want to zoom in on creator for a moment, because I think it's the most underrated one. And again, just in my recent experience, I feel like I've had at least half a dozen conversations about iconic creative organizing in the past, and sometimes in the like perennially, like going way back all the way forward, like whether that is quilting, whether that is photography we can point to that changed the opinion of whole swaths of people because of the photography that just couldn't lie to people. I think of ACT UP in exposing the AIDS epidemic and the work they did alongside creators, artists, and I was just really excited to see that as one of those, like as one of your civic personalities, and just how that shows up. Because I to your point, you make in the book and you've made tonight, a lot of people, when they think of like civic engagement, they do think of like, oh, I have to run for office, or I have to be a campaigner. I have to campaign for someone who's going to run for office, or I have to donate money, or I'm just going to vote. Right? Whereas with your civic personalities, you let people know that like all of us have a civic personality, and these are incredible ways of contributing. So I want to thank you for that quiz. I highly recommend to folks who are not at that point in the book yet to get there and take it. Did you now I can't remember. Did you identify yourself as one of the?
Yes, I am a creator.
Perfect. Of course.
Yeah.
Given all of the work you've done in communications.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I really truly believe in the past. Like, I myself came to care about politics because I grew up watching Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart and Bill Maher, and watching entertainers speak about politics and news was really, really engaging to me. And I have other reasons why I understood all things in life to be political, but I found that to be like the gateway. And I find satire, humor, I mean, I'm not the first to say that is one of the most effective ways to break down an autocratic personality. There's a reason why regimes want to ban books and art and artists. It's because they're the ones who are thinking outside of the box. If you think about what moves culture, like you said, forward, it's, what made gay people more accepted in society? It was the art, seeing it, having it visible. And that's why they want to remove that representation from art, or get angry when you see something that doesn't, align with their perfect white bread family image. And something you said about the "you are enough" piece, I think ties in here. Yeah. Part of the antisocial belief system where that is being reinforced is this idea that like only some people are worthy. And, wow. and I mean, let's be real, it comes from deep insecurity of two particular individuals' lack of self-worth and their enablers in Congress. But that is what it is. It is a lack of value of human life because human beings are human beings. And I think that, you don't have to respect everyone's thing for who they are, but you have to respect people for being humans. And people are owed a baseline level of respect for being alive, whether they don't look the way you look like you, whether they have disabilities, whether they don't have money, or if they do have money, whether they have been a felon. All of these things are what they want to do is normalize devaluing people for this reason, that reason, blah, blah, blah. And why I think about art and, being able to communicate in a way that's so important is that anybody can do that. And I think maybe one of the most human things we can do is create something. What separates us from animals is speech and the ability to imagine things and, move forward. And so I think that this is the most human of the personalities, because it's something that really anyone can do, no matter who you are, even if you are a great campaigner or whatever it is. There's something about that really just facilitates human connection in a way that other things can't. And, I think, again, this brings us to like third spaces, like libraries, like books help people connect.
Yes.
This sort of free event that goes on are things that help people connect and help children be exposed to things outside of, like, if you're not good at school, maybe you're good at something else. And, I just think I think it is really, really important. And someone asked if I have concrete examples on how to get young people engaged. And I suggest taking this as I suggest taking that as the path and really giving like a sense of free play and exploration around this. Because like you said, the current of you are enough. I think people think in politics, you're never enough. You don't know enough. You should just get out of this realm. Because you're not, and when you go to DC, that's the vibe. Like that is
the imposter phenomena you bring up around leadership. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that if you just kind of like let people explore things and show it to them from a way that's not like demanding a result, it's just, it'll be like inspiring in a lifelong way, I think, because I think people are just so sick of having things demanded of them.
Absolutely. Well, and I can't.
And you feel guilt around your lack of involvement, but if you frame it.
Right. I was going to say, I can't let it go without also pointing out you have this incredible chapter on raising children with a heart for civic engagement. And so you have like 3 pages of recommendations for how to, at any stage of a young person's life, to get them involved civically, which gets them involved in their democracy, which I love. You didn't overlook that piece of it. You weren't, at the end of the day, this book isn't even just talking to adults. This book is talking to the young people in our lives as well. And speaking of talking to people, I did see one other question that we got was, how do you engage family and friends who don't agree with you? I was so grateful for the chapter that was how to have difficult conversations, difficult political conversations. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a loaded question. One, I'm sure when someone asks that, they're picturing a different person in their head. And so I tend to say that it really depends. Is the person like down a QAnon rabbit hole and just cannot be reached? Because I don't advise having those conversations for your own mental health. You're not going to get anywhere unless you're like an expert cult deprogrammer. I don't think that is worth your own energy or, I think with certain, and this is probably not a popular opinion, but I think with certain people, it's actually not worth engaging, and it's just worth keeping the peace and kind of knowing in the back of your head, like, they have some really crazy ideas and I don't agree with them. But because I need to be, I'm assuming these are for people you need to be around, because otherwise you would just choose not to. You can put it aside. And if that is like going to make things saner, I think that's what I recommend. Now, if you have like someone who's sort of soft on it, it really, and I would say those are the people who are worth engaging. And those conversations may vary in degrees of difficulty depending on how passionate someone is about a particular issue. But I find that arguing over like facts is usually ineffective because no one believes you, like, unfortunately. I mean, you can show them something and maybe you'll hit the thing that changes their perspective. But most of these conversations are not going to be the thing that switches someone. And it's not going to be in that one conversation. So I think about it as like, okay, planting a seed where we're engaging in a way that they would not assume we would engage. And like, I think this maybe even works better with people who are sort of apathetic or not as aware or don't have as many facts on hand. they are the ones who are actually like kind of right for those conversations to be effective, because they can learn, they're learning, as opposed to someone who has all their ideas in their head. And
Yes.
a lot of times they just actually want to antagonize. Like
Right.
it feels good. So
What's their
think
motivation?
about like, right, is this about a conversation or is this about antagonizing? And you're not owed arguing with people whose values are all the things we just discussed.
I think that's really helpful. It's an important distinction, right? It gets back to, I really appreciate too that, like, just stating like you're actually under no obligation to have an argument with somebody who otherwise care about in your life. And it's important to know, like, at some point you could just walk away or walk into one of those third spaces where you feel calmed and welcomed, and you can check out a book at the same time. I think that's wonderful. I want to ask you one more question, and I wouldn't ask without having an answer myself. I want to know what's coming up on your Civic calendar. So for folks in the book club who have not had the chance to get to that part of the book yet, there's this great section on creating your own Civic calendar. On March 4th, that is the next sort of date on my Civic calendar. There is a big Protect Our Kids Day of Action. And, thank you. Yes, you can get more information at aft.org/protect our kids. I am going to look for an event in my community and go join the event, see if I can be helpful, or at the very least, just be in camaraderie with people who are holding an event to protect our kids. So March 4th is on my Civic calendar coming up in just over a week. So Sami, I'm wondering what is coming up on your Civic calendar?
Well, I will say that I am one of those people who it is my full-time job to be civically engaged. And I do a daily news show. I am like bathing in the news. I read, watch, and listen. And
I appreciate that.
Thank you. I see this as like a mission of mine. I think that I have a unique skill for translating this very esoteric and opaque world to people who are not necessarily like super acquainted with it and feel maybe uncomfortable about it or confused. And I think that I have a unique ability to explain it. So that's one thing that's on my Civic calendar. And then in March, I'm actually doing an event with, a group of activists, influencers, media people in New York City, where we're going to be doing a bunch of panels where we're going to be talking about kind of how do women take this administration going forward.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And I am excited to end tonight's book club plugging the morning announcements like I began. So again, Sami does a podcast. It is called The Morning Announcements. It is this great synopsis of the news. Again, she just compresses it to help give you some knowledge to start your day, or have to admit, sometimes it's the afternoon by the time I finally get a chance to listen to it, but it works. So, again, there are no rules. I am so grateful for your regular civic engagement. Sami, it's been wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for your time tonight. To our book club audience, if you have not had the chance to read Democracy in Retrograde yet, please do. For those of you who have read it, make sure you recommend it to a friend, because I really do feel like it is that shot in the arm we can all use right now to make sure that we are engaged civically in ways that help us take care of ourselves and take care of our country at the same time.